To all the non-believers, 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 non-believers. I'm making out.
What's good, y'all? This is Jay Varsity, and welcome to another episode of NBA Talk. It's been a couple of weeks. You know, a lot of things have changed in the NBA, including standings where everybody is in the season. You know, we've had some big games, big performances. We're gonna get right into it. Well, let's start like we did in the last episode. This is episode 139, by the way, and we're gonna get right into updates of the standings and injuries and all that other stuff. Just like how we did in the previous episode, we're gonna start with the Eastern Conference, and we're gonna start with the first place Philadelphia 76ers. The 76ers have had a couple of impressive wins. Sorry if I seem like I'm stuttering. They had wins over the Clippers and the Brooklyn Nets. Let's see if I'm not mistaken. Yes, and so far, Joel Embiid, I gotta say, he's back to his MVP form. He's going back to dominating like how he was, and he's just making a case for himself on why he should be MVP. And he's just a mismatch for anybody. I can't emphasize that enough. He's just been a problem. Him and Ben Simmons on the defensive end. Ben Simmons takes on any assignment. Like I'm loving what I'm seeing from Ben Simmons, and he should really be considered to be the leading candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. He's my Defensive Player of the Year in my book, because when you take on willingly any assignment, when you go from having to guard Kevin Durant and switching to guarding Kyrie Irving, and you just do that willingly, and you're just willing to take on any challenge, that's what makes you a Defensive Player of the Year. I don't care how many shots you block throughout the year. I don't care how many timely steals you get. If you are willing to take on the assignment of guarding the most overall talented player on the team, if you're willing to take on the superstars with no hesitation, that's what makes you the Defensive Player of the Year. So, and Philly just in general is a great three-point shooting team, and every time I see them play, I just see great team ball. Tobias Harris, him and Joel Embiid on the pick and roll are just they're just a nightmare matchup on that end. I would just have to say the Philadelphia 76ers are right where they need to be. They're a team that deserves to be in first place. I'm just saying, in my opinion, they deserve to be in first place. They've been playing too great of team ball, and Joel Embiid is having an amazing year, and I think Joel Embiid is my overall favorite to win MVP. I know people got Nikola Jokic. I know some people got Damian Lillard, and LeBron was part of it until his injury. So right now, my favorite has got to be Joel Embiid. It has to be Joel Embiid. Let's see. There's no. Let me see. Any updates on the roster? Let me see. Let's see. Just give me a second. Let's see. Check that out real quick. No, not that I know of. Let's see. No latest on injury reports here. Let's see. Go back. That's the update on the Philadelphia 76ers. Now let's move on to the second place Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets dealing with different news on a different day. They're on a different headline every single day, and it feels like Kevin Durant is a headline every single day. Kevin Durant suffered a high thigh contusion, and even though to a lot of people it doesn't seem like a big deal, and to me, I don't think it's that crazy, but to me, the injuries are just becoming way too consistent. The injuries are becoming way too consistent, and I'm gonna be honest, it's very much alarming, because ever since he came back from his Achilles, he's been dealing with a lot of thigh contusions. He's been dealing with a lot of knee injuries. He's just had a lot of leg injuries since he's come back. And I'm not wishing nothing on anyone, but it's just very concerning to see Kevin Durant constantly being out. He can't play a set number of games. I don't think Kevin Durant has played 3 games in a row since the way he started this season. I don't think he's played 3 games in a row. After that loss, after the first I think he played the first few minutes against Miami yesterday, and he had to leave the game with a high thigh contusion. To me, it looked like a knee injury because it looked like he was grabbing his knee, but who knows? I'm not a doctor. But the Brooklyn Nets dealing with the news of LaMarcus Aldridge having to retire due to an irregular heartbeat, that was just unfortunate to hear. Like, you don't want to hear nothing like that. You don't want to hear players having to retire due to health concerns. That was tough to hear. Like, I'm not exactly a fan of what the Brooklyn Nets have done this year, but that was hard to hear when you hear a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge having to retire for something like that. It just reminds me of Chris Bosh when he had to retire due to blood clots, and that you hate when you have to hear stuff like that. But it's just like, honestly, that's just that life attacks you and life goes at you in different ways. And apparently LaMarcus Aldridge had an irregular heartbeat, and it was too much of a risk. It was too much of a risk. You're playing a game where your heart is going to be racing like crazy, and if your heartbeat is not in rhythm, then that could be very concerning. There could be a moment where he could have literally had a heart attack right there on the court, and I know as fans we don't want to see that. So hopefully, God, I'm wishing him the best of health for the future for LaMarcus Aldridge, and congratulations on an amazing career. Because as much as I criticize LaMarcus Aldridge, he still was one of the best bigs in our time. In our time, he had a mid-range shot that was just money every single time, and his time in Portland with Damian Lillard, Brandon Roy, it's just it's just one of those stories where it's just another what if story. What if all these guys would have stood healthy? Because apparently, I looked back in that history when it comes to the Portland Trailblazers, when it came to Brandon Roy and LaMarcus Aldridge. Apparently, when those two played together, they only played 62 games, and their record was 50-12. So that is absolutely nuts. That's crazy. But again, it's just gonna be another what if story. And James Harden is still out due to his injury. James Harden is due to his injury when it comes to his hamstring. The Brooklyn Nets, I'm going to get into their game last night with the Miami Heat. Kyrie Irving put up 20 points. Landry Shamet put up a career high 30. But the Miami Heat ended up getting the win right at the buzzer thanks to Bam Adebayo. And the Brooklyn Nets, again, I'm not going to emphasize this anymore. The defensive end is where there's going to be a problem. Their defense is going to be their downfall. I don't care how great their offense is, because if you have to be playing with multiple different lineups all year, you don't have a consistent offense that you can rely on. You have to keep doing things on the fly. And to me, I don't know how this is considered a championship team, but I understand if everybody was healthy, I would understand where everybody's coming from. But at the same time, I emphasize defense. I emphasize defense when it comes to championship contenders, and right now Brooklyn is just not that. They're just not that. I'm not trying to sound like a hater. I think when they're completely healthy, this team would be dominating right now. But I just don't see the consistency, and plus nobody can stay healthy. Like I said, health plays a huge factor when it comes to being a championship contender, and right now they are not that. They are very much vulnerable. They can be beat in a playoff series. So everybody that keeps saying, "Oh, that Brooklyn is just gonna run their way through the Eastern Conference," like teams like the Philadelphia 76ers and the Milwaukee Bucks will have something to say about that. Speaking of, we're gonna move on to the Milwaukee Bucks sitting at third. And by the way, I forgot to mention the records of both the Sixers and the Nets. The Sixers sitting at 39-17. The Brooklyn Nets sitting at 38-19, and now we're moving on to the Milwaukee Bucks, sitting at 35-21. The Milwaukee Bucks had a short stretch where they didn't have Giannis, and they were up and down. But then Giannis came back. They're playing somewhat a consistent ball, but they're taking some weird losses. And the Milwaukee Bucks, I just don't feel like people have that same confidence about Milwaukee after the past 2 years. And I could kind of see where people are coming from, where they're going like, okay, we keep saying the same thing about the Bucks every single year, and it's like they come in, they're red hot in the regular season, they'll play some dominating ball, and then come playoff time, you're just waiting for their collapse. That's not the cycle that you want to fall in. That you want to give people a reason to wait for your collapse, and it's just. And especially when you see Giannis, you're seeing how much he dominates in the regular season, and then people are just saying, "Oh, wait till he gets to the postseason," and then everybody's gonna do the same thing. They're just gonna build a wall around him, and he's just gonna forget how to score the basketball. The Milwaukee Bucks are solely just gonna give the ball to Giannis and just forget how to play team basketball. And unfortunately, that has been the habit. But I believe with Jrue Holiday, it's gonna be a different story. Because Jrue Holiday is another ball handler that can create his own shot, and he has proven time and time again he can carry a team to wins. Because when in the games that Giannis wasn't playing, him and Chris Middleton have proven to be that combo that they can get wins also. So maybe I'm just saying, maybe just maybe things might play differently for the Milwaukee Bucks this year, because you can't play that same wall defense when you got a guy like Jrue Holiday that could also get his own shot off the dribble, and he just attacks defenders. He's a great two-way player. And again, I just need to see something from Chris Middleton. I just need to see more of that consistent play, not just stand at the perimeter, go get your shot from the mid-range, go off the dribble, attack the defenders. Like, I want to see that aggressive Chris Middleton. I don't want to see the Chris Middleton that just stands at the perimeter waiting for Giannis to give him the ball, because he always turns into that player come postseason time. And Chris Middleton is a great player. I hate how he settles in the postseason. When Giannis was out in Game 4 of last year's playoffs, he took over. So I want him to do that again in this year's playoffs. Take over. Don't just settle and give the ball to Giannis and expect him to do something every single possession. You and Jrue Holiday need to be the X factors of this playoff run. It's a must. It's a must. In order for the Bucks to succeed, Chris Middleton and Jrue Holiday need to be the keys for the Bucks' success. Now, moving on to number 4, the Atlanta Hawks, sitting at a record of 31-26. The Atlanta Hawks, I enjoy watching the Atlanta Hawks play, and they again remind me, like I said, of the Mike D'Antoni system you have to try to outshoot the Atlanta Hawks. They played a great team ball. I believe they have 4 or 5 players within 20 point scoring, and along with Trae Young's 29. The Atlanta Hawks, they're just a team that's going to be on the rise. They're going to be a team that's going to be fighting in the playoffs from here on out. At first, I was really high on them, and then I started to lose. I lost my confidence in them a little bit, but now they're getting back into that rhythm, and they're sitting in the 4th spot in the Eastern Conference. And even though people talk a little bit of their crap when it comes to the Eastern Conference being weak and all that, but you can't help but think that the Eastern Conference is becoming very, very interesting this year. And when you got a team like the Atlanta Hawks sitting at number 4, they could possibly give teams a little bit of a run for their money because of how much they are deadly from the perimeter. And like I said, you have to try to outshoot Atlanta. You got to defend and outshoot Atlanta. And in more ways than one, it's going to be very challenging. So now sitting at number 5 is the Boston Celtics. I've given my criticism of the Boston Celtics, and I think Boston is finally starting to figure things out. They're finally starting to figure things out. The great play from Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown lately has just been uplifting them. Kemba Walker has gotten back into form. Even though they've missed Robert Williams, I feel like their game is still they're playing still at a consistent level. They're not slacking. They're obviously above 500, not like how they were a couple weeks ago. Jason Tatum putting on that show against Golden State on Saturday. Him and Steph were just going blow for blow when it came to scoring. That was one of those amazing duels that we love seeing. This is why the game of basketball is so damn special. That's why I love this game so much. You can have great performances like this where you got two great players, especially a guy like Steph and a guy like Jason Tatum, who's supposed to be the next man. He's supposed to be the next man up when it comes to one of the next great NBA superstars, and they're just going at each other, and you just love that about this game. That's what makes this game so special. The Boston Celtics sitting at 31-26, tied with the Atlanta Hawks, and like I said, they're starting to really figure things out, and maybe it was just the certain protocols that was into play, but you're starting to see more of that consistency, more of that team ball. And like I said, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum are just having one of the best years of their careers, and at the right time too. Because if they would have kept sliding down in the Eastern Conference and would have slid down to that 8th seed, that would have been a problem, because they have not beaten the Philadelphia 76ers. If they would have ended up playing them in the first round, I would have Philly beating them in the first round. And if things were standing right now, they would be playing the Atlanta Hawks in the first round. And honestly, that's an interesting series, because when you got a team that's so perimeter oriented and they're not exactly, they still have that missing piece in the bigs. That's where the Atlanta Hawks come in. When they have Clint Capella, they still have a big that can attack. So to me, that would be an interesting playoff series. But again, we have to see come playoff time. We still got time. We still got a little bit of time to go on that. Sitting at 6th is the New York Knicks with a record of 31-27. New York Knicks have won 6 in a row, and Julius Randle is the reason why. Julius Randle is single-handedly brought faith into New York Knicks fans, because the New York Knicks have not been this exciting in years. And the fact that you have a team like Brooklyn when they got who they have, and then you got the Knicks, apparently it's supposed to be a landslide who's supposed to be a better New York team. And again, Brooklyn does have the better record, but the New York Knicks have been that fun team that people are just excited in seeing, because they want to see the development of RJ Barrett. They want to see what they want to see Obi Toppin, Julius Randle. They love the New York team. The New York Knicks have become that underdog team that people just love to watch thrive and win, because they fight for their wins. They literally fight for their wins. They don't slack off. And that's thanks again to Tom Thibodeau. I was critical on Tom Thibodeau because he drives it, because he to me, he overplays his starters. But I think the Knicks needed a coach like that, because they didn't have a coach that was so heavy on the defensive end. And that's where the New York Knicks have been thriving on the defensive end. They give teams like Brooklyn and Philly problems because of how physical they are. They get very physical with teams like that. And when it comes to Philly is good when they play teams like Philly and the Nets are a finesse team. I'm going to say it right now. The Nets are a finesse team. And when you play a team like Philly, they're another team that relies a lot on the defensive end, and it becomes a grit and grind game. And that's when games get a lot more sloppy, a lot more physical, and and those games could go either way. The New York Knicks have developed that kind of style, and it's brought hope back into New York Knicks fans. Sitting at 7th is the Miami Heat with a record of 29-28, only one game above 500. They got a big win against Brooklyn yesterday with Bam Adebayo with the last second mid-range game buzzer beater. The Miami Heat, they're another team that is just, if they could just have their whole team healthy for just a stretch, because Jimmy Butler has just been in and out of the lineup, and even though they didn't have Jimmy Butler yesterday, the Miami Heat still managed to pull out a win. It's just becoming very tough when it comes to them getting stretches of wins, because anytime they get a stretch of wins, somebody gets hurt, and it's just it's just been that kind of year when it comes to teams. Teams can't go on these long win streaks because of the fact that the schedule is just so weird, and it's forcing more injuries because more key players have gotten injured so far this year, and I don't know where the numbers prove that supposedly those numbers have went down. You see more people taking games off and saying that that's for injury purposes, but they're trying to cover up that they're resting. Now, to me, the legitimacy of the injury is not for me to question. If Jimmy Butler is hurt, it's because I believe he's hurt. Because Jimmy Butler, to me, does not look like a guy that he just wants to not play. He plays his heart out every single night. He just plays his heart out. And then sitting at 8th is the Charlotte Hornets with a record of 28-28. Look, the Charlotte Hornets, they're just gonna try to hang on. If they fall out of the playoff standings, then they fall out of the playoff standings. They don't have Gordon Hayward, they don't have LaMelo Ball. They're just hanging on with what they got. And even though they're fighting, to me, if they fall out of the playoff standings, I would not blame any situations other than the fact that they had untimely injuries. That would be the only excuse I would have for the Charlotte Hornets. There's no other reason why. Because when they were fully healthy, they were actually playing some very consistent ball. You could clearly see it too. Sitting at 8th is the Indiana Pacers. The one thing I have to say that I've been liking from the Indiana Pacers is how great Karis LeVert has been thriving. Even though it doesn't really say much when they're 26-30, but I'm not even looking at record-wise. I'm just looking at how Karis LeVert has been averaging 27.5 points a game since he got to Indiana. Like, he's just thriving. I don't know what is it about Indiana that some players just have these career years when they go to the Indiana Pacers. Like, you got Victor Oladipo, now you got Karis LeVert, you got Malcolm Brogdon. It's like, what the hell? Like, I don't know what is it about the Indiana Pacers that people just start to thrive, and then as soon as they leave, it's like they don't thrive as much when they leave Indiana. Like, look at guys like Lance Stevenson. Lance Stevenson would be a dog whenever he played for the Pacers, and then when he plays for any other team, he doesn't play with that same dog mentality, man. And you just wonder, what is it about the Indiana Pacers that they just play extremely hard? And that's just a question that can only be answered another day. Sitting at 10th is the Toronto Raptors. The Toronto Raptors, oh man. I don't think we need to emphasize enough how much the Toronto Raptors have fallen off. Like, to me, the Toronto Raptors, they went from being a championship team 2 years ago to now being a 10th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they're just going strictly into a rebuild. I don't see where they're going to move on. I understand Gary Trent has just been balling since he got to Toronto, but this is strictly a rebuild. This is strictly a rebuild from here on out. There's nothing more I can say on that. The Chicago Bulls are making the Chicago Bulls, a team that I said would be a dark horse to make it into the playoffs. They're making it very difficult on themselves, and then losing Zach LaVine, I think that's just icing on the cake. I think their playoff hopes have just died. I think their playoff hopes have just died just as well as the Wizards, the Cavs, the Magic, and the Pistons. They're all done. They're all done in my opinion. To me, from seeds 1 through 10, The Raptors are the last team that can sneak into the playoffs, and I wouldn't even give them a puncher's chance of making it in. I wouldn't even give them a puncher's chance of making it in because the Raptors, they don't have that team like they did to be able to consistently make the playoffs anymore. Let's see. Let's move on to the Western Conference. All right, we're at the Western Conference. We're sitting at first is the Utah Jazz of a record of 42-15. Even though the Utah Jazz took a loss to the Los Angeles Lakers on Saturday, Rudy Gobert didn't play. Yeah, Rudy Gobert, Derek Favors, and Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley did not play on Saturday in their loss against the Los Angeles Lakers. Even though that game still ended up being a nail biter in overtime, then the Lakers took over and won. It was still a great game, but those injuries to Donovan Mitchell, man, what a bad time to have that. But I believe the Utah Jazz, they're a collective team, and I've seen them win games without Donovan Mitchell. I believe they'll hang on unless something were to drastically happen to that team. I have no idea. But to me, the Utah Jazz are still firmly in control of the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. Sitting at number 2 with a record of 40-16 is the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are only a couple games back from Utah, and they can. I would give them a chance to take the number 1 seed, but depending on the schedule, I wouldn't put it past it if Utah just held on to the number 1 seed. I wouldn't put it past them because, again, the Utah Jazz have been playing consistent ball, and I'm not saying the Phoenix Suns haven't, but I would just say it depends on just how tough the schedules are. If the Phoenix Suns have a somewhat easier schedule than the Jazz, then I would give them more than a puncher's chance of stealing the number 1 seed, and I would think that would be the shocker of the year for the Phoenix Suns to be the number 1 seed from a team that could not sneak into the bubble in the playoffs to being the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. I think that would be one of the best comeback stories of this season. And to me, it would push my consideration to have Devin Booker be in the MVP race, which I think is absolutely ridiculous on why he hasn't been considered. Why he hasn't been considered, I have no idea. Why Devin Booker has not been considered an MVP when he's leading this team with Chris Paul to the second seed in the Western Conference. And then credit to Chris Paul needs to be given, because you can't tell me that Chris Paul has no impact on this Phoenix Suns team. Any team he goes to, all of a sudden starts winning. Chris Paul doesn't. You could say, "Oh, Chris Paul doesn't have a championship. He doesn't have a ring. He hasn't been to a finals. He's only been to 1 conference finals." So what? So what? Every team he goes to starts winning. I'm sorry. After what he did in OKC, carrying that team to the playoffs when they had a minimal chance of making the playoffs that year, that to me is an accomplishment all by itself. And now you telling me he's here leading with helping Devin Booker lead this Phoenix Suns team to the second best record in the Western Conference. Come on, man. Chris Paul is a Hall of Famer, man. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a Hall of Fame leader. You cannot sit here and tell me that this man, everywhere he goes, that teams just start winning for no good reason. He has an impact on the leadership aspect. He helps teams play harder. He helps teams play hard. And when you got a hard worker like Devin Booker, it makes things that much easier. Now that I got through on that, sitting at number 3 in the Western Conference, it is the Los Angeles Clippers. Los Angeles Clippers had a blowout win against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Their previous game they lost to the Philadelphia 76ers, but Paul George has been playing some consistent ball. He's been averaging on a stretch 32 points. He's been averaging, I believe, 53% from the 3-point line. So Paul George is on a stretch. But to me, like when it comes to Paul George, I say it once, I'll say it again. Paul George, I don't care what you do in the regular season. You're an amazing player in the regular season. We question what the hell happens to you in the postseason, because we still believe you're that great player, but what in the hell happens to you in the postseason? That is just I don't know what it is. What is the question? That's a question that needs to be answered. What happens to you in the postseason? It's especially, you got to make up for that mess from last year. You got to make up for that mess from last year. It's like you can't have a series like that again. You can't have a series where nobody could depend on you to even hit wide open 3-point shots. That just cannot happen. Kawhi Leonard is doing Kawhi Leonard. The Clippers have just been hanging on to that third spot. They don't want to fall any deeper than they have to. And to me, they're gonna remain in that third spot, and we just have to see how things go from here on out, because everybody wants to see the Battle of LA between the two LA teams, but I still don't think we're gonna see it this year. I still don't believe we're gonna see it. Like I said, we have to just see it to believe it when it comes to the Battle of LA. Sitting at the 4th spot is the Denver Nuggets. Whew. The Denver Nuggets, they're hanging on as well, even though their roster is still solid. But I just think the injury to Jamal Murray is just that's a tough injury for me to swallow. That, to me, Jamal Murray is just. But so yes, the Denver Nuggets, that injury is very hard to swallow when it comes to Jamal Murray. I think that's going to impact their playoff run. And even though the additions of Aaron Gordon and you still have a deep roster, it's just, to me, you need a guy like Jamal Murray that complements Nikola Jokic in order to beat teams like the Clippers, to compete with teams like the Utah Jazz and the Phoenix Suns, the Los Angeles Lakers. You just need that guard that can get his own shot off the dribble. And to me, to have Jamal Murray out this late in the season, that's a tough blow. Their record is 36-20. They're 4 games behind the Clippers for the 3rd spot, and to me, if the standings were to stay as they were, then I wouldn't be surprised to have Denver at 4th. Sitting at 5th is the reigning defending NBA champions, the Los Angeles Lakers, with a record of 35-22. And the Los Angeles Lakers had a big win against the Utah Jazz on Saturday. And they're just, like I said, they are just hanging on. The Lakers, you got to be impressed with the Los Angeles Lakers for just hanging on without their 2 superstars. They're still playing consistent defense. They're playing tough basketball. Dennis Schroeder is putting in production on the scoring load. Montrezl Harrell also. Kyle Kuzma has also been putting in the work. Andre Drummond had a big night against Utah. The team is coming together. They just need their 2 superstars to come back. That's just it. They're hanging on, and they're just fighting until their 2 superstars come back. LeBron is apparently going to come back is going to be considered to come back in another 2 weeks. Anthony Davis is apparently going to return within this week or so. I'm not very sure. I can't really confirm it. So, like I said, the Lakers are just hanging on. They're hanging on to that 5th seed, and you have people that are afraid that the Lakers are going to fall to the 7th seed, and they would have to play a team like the Phoenix Suns in the 1st round, or they would end up playing in the play-in tournament. And fully healthy, I wouldn't expect any of the bottom teams in the Western Conference to beat the Lakers in a playoff series. But at the same time, you don't want to be in a situation where you have to be in a play-in tournament in order to participate in the playoffs. So I can see where the concern is there. But I think the Lakers are just hanging on. They're going to wait for the 2 superstars to come back, and things could go a lot more smoother after that. Same with the Portland Trailblazers. The Portland Trailblazers, they're playing consistent ball, but I just don't find myself having that faith anymore in the Portland Trailblazers, because it feels like every time they go in one direction, they take 2 steps back. And to me, Damian Lillard should be in consideration for MVP. He should be considered because he did carry this Portland Trailblazers team for a very long time until CJ McCollum came back. And even then, and then Damian Lillard does make a huge point. Nobody gets defended as hard as Damian Lillard does, where they have to do a trap double team right at half court because he could pull up right from the logo. He has the same impact as Steph Curry. He has the very same impact, and he just dissects defenses with his range and then how he slashes to the paint. He's just that much of a combo guard. Sitting at 7th is the Dallas Mavericks with the record of 30-26. I got nothing much to say about the Dallas Mavericks. They just need to hang on, and they're gonna end up being in that play-in tournament. And to me, I'll be disappointed if the Dallas Mavericks end up not making it, because this is a team that will give teams problems, because they're another team that relies heavily on the three-point shot, and they're a team that can make a lot of threes. I mean, just ask the Clippers and ask the Celtics. They are a team that can put up a lot of threes, and when they get hot, like the Atlanta Hawks, they are very tough to stop when they're hitting their threes. The Memphis Grizzlies, John Morant. What else can you say? John Morant doing his thing with the Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies are always that team in the Western Conference. They're always going to be in the mix. But more like just being in the mix of just fighting for the playoffs. The Golden State Warriors took a loss to the Boston Celtics on Saturday with Stephen Curry putting up 47. Stephen Curry has been putting up amazing numbers. He's been putting up damn near 40 points a game. And you got people saying if he should be in the consideration of MVP. If we're talking sold numbers, then I'll be saying hell yes. But I think they rely too much on impacts of teams that in order for them to choose who the MVP is. And I believe when you got guys like Joel Embiid, you got guys like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Damian Lillard. I'll throw in personally Devin Booker. I think people will start to say that Steph's numbers are almost empty stats. They're almost empty stats. I got nothing much to say about the San Antonio Spurs. The Pelicans have been a disappointment. I don't understand why the Pelicans are so bad. I'm starting to get really confused because Zion is just flat out balling. Zion Williamson is flat out balling, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about Zion Williamson like they did last year, and it kind of pisses me off. He's having how many 30-point games so far this season, and he's gotten key wins for the Pelicans, and I just don't understand why this team is so bad. I just do not understand it. I just truly don't. The Pelicans are just confusing to me, and until they do something next season, then I don't know what direction they think they're going. Again, I got nothing much to say about the Kings, the Thunder, the Rockets, or the Timberwolves. I got nothing much to say on them. So yeah, this was just a quick rundown on where we are in the standings. If you want to be reminded, the Jazz are sitting at 1, Phoenix at 2, Clippers at 3, Nuggets at 4, Lakers at 5, Portland 6, 7th Mavericks, and 8th the Memphis Grizzlies, Golden State at 9th, Spurs at 10th, Pelicans at 11th, Kings at 12th, OKC at 13th, Rockets at 14th, and the Minnesota Timberwolves at 15th. And in the Eastern Conference, Philly 1st, Brooklyn 2nd, Milwaukee 3rd, Atlanta 4th, Boston 6th, the New York Knicks at 6th, Miami at 7th, Charlotte at 8th, Indiana at 9th, Raptors at 10th, the Chicago Bulls at 11th, Washington Wizards at 12th, Cleveland Cavaliers at 13th, Orlando Magic at 14th, and Detroit Pistons at 15th. So yeah, that's just the rundown on where everything is on where everybody stands in the NBA. Who obviously is gonna make the playoffs, and to me, it's gonna be an interesting stretch because the play-in tournament still plays a huge factor, especially in the Western Conference, because from 7th through 10th, you got the Dallas Mavericks, the Memphis Grizzlies, the Golden State Warriors, and the San Antonio Spurs. And the Golden State Warriors still can make it into the postseason. They can still make it into the postseason. They just need to have that luck. They need to have that luck, and so can the San Antonio Spurs. And until we see something from the New Orleans Pelicans, they have less than a slight chance of making the postseason because they're sitting at 11th at 25-32. But yeah, I said everything I need to say, and I said everything I need to say. I gave my opinions on each of these teams, and we just need to see where things go from here. The postseason should be very exciting, but we just need to see who gets in first. Anyway, that's it. That's all. Like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell if you like basketball content. Stay safe. This is your boy Jay Varsity, and I'm out. Peace.
We got some non-believers out there.
Make believers